video and TV, content innovation. And my name is Cliff Friedman. I'm the managing partner of Constellation Ventures. We're a $450 million venture capital fund with investors such as Sony Corporation, Mitsubishi Corporation, Young & Rubicam, Axiom, Viacom, Hasbro, Times, Mirror, Tribune, NTT Data, NBC, and the like, along with some high net worth individuals who are major producers, directors, actors, and musicians that are all investors in our fund. So this is a particular keen interest to us, is to try to better and better understand the content models of various distribution systems that are coming both now and in the future. We're talking about technology and platforms that make the systems go here. I think the first thing, just by looking at the nature of the speakers that they've assembled for this panel, the diversity of the panelists, just to give you a true understanding of the complexity of what it does take to make a system go. It's not something that's very easy, but something that's going to be quite complex, and we're going to have to really focus to make sure it works smoothly and seamlessly for the consumers of such media. The things that I wanted to chat about today, and I spoke to some of the panelists about prior, really starts about with standards. I don't think there's currently one standard out there when we talk about true mobile TV, mobile video. I'm not talking about streaming per se, although I'm sure some panelists will have an opinion about streaming. We're talking about true mobile terrestrial television, all right? Standards such as DVB-H, media flow, ISDB, DMB, etc. There's lots of standards depending upon where you are in the world and how is that all going to shake out. The second thing is when we had the battle of navigational and promotional preference on the TV, as we had back in the early days, and even with the internet, I think there's also there'll be a battle for navigational promotional preference as you turn on your cell phone. Frankly, I don't think we want to see that little Motorola sign. We're going to want to see, our own particular content packaging ready for us as individuals. Rights management and the resolution of those rights. In fact, I just had lunch prior to coming here with one of our investors who is a business manager for probably the top producers and directors in Hollywood. And we talked all about the rights issues and about how the broadcasters are dictating certain models to their producers and how some of those producers may or may not help those networks because they don't feel they're getting their just compensation for their content and their product. We'll talk hopefully a little bit about business models for the content, subscription and supported. Do you do it for promotion and marketing, or are you really trying to make money? Fifth point, I think we'll try to talk about packaging versus original content. What are the content economics? And then frankly also e-commerce. What does it mean to really, is there technologies that will be embedded in the phone or embedded in mobility that will allow you to actually do true commerce on the fly wirelessly? And then obviously there's so much more to talk about, whether it's a direct model or a carrier model. Will the broadcaster go directly to the consumer, or will it be through a carrier, et cetera. So with that, why don't I let the panelists just literally, guys, one or two liners about who you are and what your company does, and then we'll start with some questions.
Okay, so I'm Paul Scanlon, co-founder and chief operating officer of MobiTV. And MobiTV is one of the companies that helped build this mobile TV industry by launching live television to cell phones 3 years ago here in the United States. And since then, we've moved on to support over 25 operators and are now moving into broader digital media, including support for PCs and converged devices.
Hi, I am not Rich Cusick. My name is Bob Shallow. I am stepping in for Rich, representing TV Guide, and I am the VP GM of TV Guide Mobile Entertainment. And I'm here to talk about TV Guide's move into the mobile space and how we're taking the IPG, the Interactive Programming Guide, that's penetrated a significant number of paid television homes and migrating that to mobile devices.
My name is Matthew Feldman, President and CEO of Versely Entertainment. We're one of the old timers around here. We started in 2000. We started with ringtones and wallpapers, and last year we launched our first video channel, seeing that the future of mobile entertainment is about video, and that's really our strategic direction going forward, is operating a family of mobile video on demand channels throughout the world.
Hi, my name is Ratan Ratanshaw. I'm the Senior Vice President and General NXP Semiconductors, and you guys are probably saying, who on earth are NXP Semiconductors? But until recently, about a month ago, we were known as Philips Semiconductors. So, company formerly known as Philips Semiconductors, now NXP. We are very involved in making a lot of systems for the portable area, both handheld and the mobile phone, and we're also involved in homes. So where there's a lot of convergence, we see it as quite a good idea to work with these systems. You talked about being the oldest person here, 10 years old.
Oldest mobile company.
Well, we've been 50 years in the semiconductor business, so it's all relative.
Thomas Ellsworth, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of GoTV Networks, large producer of made-for-mobile content. We generate over 300 individual shows a week distributed into channel packages. And we support a variety of broadcast technologies, and we're here to talk about making things look good and work on regardless of what phone the consumer carries, regardless of what technology the carrier selected.
Okay, so I'll open it up to the audience at about, we have until 5 o'clock, so we have about 15 minutes or so. So let me just ask a couple of questions, and then we can open that up to the audience for those that have questions. I guess, first of all, I think one of the things that I look at is streaming versus true broadcast. Well, let me ask you a question. You know, when we hear about streaming, we hear about, you know, how many true simultaneous users can we basically have without, I would say, significant performance degradation, because when you look at technologies like a DVH or MediaFlow, it's a separate network, higher bandwidth, or actually dedicated bandwidth, and it's higher quality. When you start to have, you know, when will we be able to support millions of simultaneous users? I don't think that's anytime too soon on streaming. Do you disagree or agree?
I would disagree, actually. You know, in our situation, we have actually over 1 million subscribers, fast approaching 2 million. I haven't seen any congestion or impact on the network. I think what you're talking about is condensed populations around a single cell sector. Supporting thousands of streaming sessions is not the issue. It's the available spectrum that you have. But I think one of the, so from MobiTV, our perspective on that is that, you know, broadcast technology, I mean, it's very interesting technology, and we're excited about it as well. And we're actually making a lot of moves into that space where, you know, we're not looking at it as sort of building up a sort of 1950s version of broadcast television. What we're looking at is leveraging the existing infrastructure, or even complementary networks that are being deployed in addition to those networks, to do things like, you know, streaming unicast while also being able to support the switch over to multicast when and where needed. I think, you know, the interesting phenomena about, if you look at the mobile TV space, it's actually moving in the opposite direction of the rest of the television industry, where the cable and big pay TV providers are all actually moving towards closer to a unicast solution where the bandwidth and network is available, and it's more efficient because it provides a lot more opportunity for a longer tail of content, more interactivity. So we see the world as sort of a hybrid, some combination of both, where you can have streaming content and broadcast content, or just the ability to be able to switch from unicast to broadcast. So in the WiMAX specification, which is one of the big technologies that I think a lot of people, it's starting to get a little more notoriety today, we actually look at the broadcast solution as an interim solution to a problem that doesn't yet exist. And I agree with you that at some point in time, you know, the network's going to be congested. The truth is, at that point in time, there are a lot of other ways to solve that congestion issue, one of which is building an $800 million parallel network that's single purpose. The other one is building a multi-purpose network and really providing converged service over WiMAX and being able to deliver unicast and multicast together with a single network. So that's where we're headed.
So I just want to be clear. You say you had 1 million subscribers. When I talked about congestion, I talked about simultaneous users looking at the same exact content at the same time. Are you saying
in a single cell?
Right. So you're saying you can support 1 million subs simultaneously, not single cell, but spread out.
if there were a million, we have 1 million subscribers. It doesn't
Correct.
mean that we're supporting 1 million simultaneous sessions.
Correct.
It's a big difference. It's kind of like asking the question, what if everyone in New York City flushed their toilet at the same time? Yeah, it'd create a big mess. We have 1 million subscribers. They don't all watch TV at the same time.
That's the
Thankfully.
Tonight Show, after the monologue.
So what we've done is we've been, we have data. We've been operating the service for over 3 years now, and we do have existing subscribers. And so we're not up here talking as if we have all the answers. What we're doing is we're looking at the data, and we're looking at the data and listening to what the data tells us, and we're helping our carrier customers and our partners really understand what is the data telling them and how soon will they need that network to really alleviate these congestion issues that might occur on their network. And the irony is that the carriers that we work the closest to are the ones that are in the least panic to deploy a system like this. And you've probably seen the announcements from Sprint. I mean, they're moving on WiMAX, and I think that's the right choice.
Yeah, I think mobile WiMAX is an extremely interesting technology. Bob, with regard to the IPG, I said one of the things was navigational and promotional preference. It's been quite a battle in the early days of both cable television and internet, who controls that front screen. And remember, I think Netscape, blew it in the early days when Netscape, frankly, everybody went to that Netscape homepage and they didn't really know how to monetize that business, right? So how does one, I can't imagine a single carrier wanting your IPG in front of their screen. So tell me, how are you going to gain your position in the marketplace?
Well, it's going to be a couple of ways. One is, there's a lot of credibility to the TV Guide brand. And the fact that it's been around for as long as it has been since the 50s. And I think when you talk to a lot of the mobile operators, they recognize that they don't necessarily have tremendous credibility as video distributors. They're new to the game. And so there's certain advantages to taking advantage of the TV Guide brand. Now, it's not to say that the guide has to be branded TV Guide in all instances. There may be a situation where it's powered by. So, our model is to really work with the operator to provide them flexibility in delivering the services that they want to deliver to the consumers. And what that really means is a very simple way to deliver, a simple and familiar way to deliver both in-band and out-of-band video services. And by that I mean in their network, in the carrier network, and then networks being provided, whether it's WiMAX, Wi-Fi, or broadcast, potentially by third-party providers, putting all of that together and offering it through a common UI that, again, is very simple to use, simple to navigate, and familiar because people are using it at home.
So Bob, in the days of television, we knew what TV Guide's business model was and how they made money from that business model, which was charging on a per-sub basis to the operators. Tell me, how does your business now make money? That model doesn't seem applicable to the mobile world.
Well, I don't necessarily know that that's true. I think that there's, also bear in mind that TV Guide is not just about IPG. We also happen to be, have the TV Guide channel, which is distributed over 70 million households in the U.S. We have an on-demand channel that's distributed to over 20-some-odd million households. So there's, we're actually making money on a range of products. As it relates to the IPG, we're looking at several alternatives. In fact, in Japan, we have a service called G-Guide, which is ad-supported, and we have now over 9 million registered users on a service that launched about a little over a year ago. And so there's a number of different ways that we can attack this, whether it be a straight licensing model or whether it's an ad-supported model. And I think that's something that the carriers, too, are trying to figure out.
So ad-supported or some licensing fees, basically
Yep.
the two business models.
Yep.
And care to share who's doing what?
Not yet.
Okay. All right.
There will be releases to that effect soon.
All right, Matt, I think one of the things that we chatted about was packaging versus original content, and we'll get to GoTV in a minute, but typically, at least in the Hollywood world, or at least in the television world, developing original content was always a tricky business, mostly a money-losing business, right? Except for those hit shows that one would make it. Whereas the packaging business has typically been much more forgiving and frankly more profitable for more people. Look at a Viacom, for instance, and other companies that basically make a lot of money from packaging other people's content if they make the right licensing spread. why don't we talk a little bit about what your business is doing in terms of the spread between packaging that of multiple different kinds of programming to perhaps create a channel with a certain sensibility and original content. Which do you believe in?
I feel there's always a mix. There's always the cornerstone channels of the ABC, NBC, Fox, and CBS, but looking at YouTube being sold for $1.6 billion, there is absolutely a market for original content, whether it's user-generated or it's other content on the web. So having that good mix and having a compelling channel that speaks to a specific audience is where I think the popular mobile channels will be, whether it is the ABC and NBC or it's specific genre of content that any of us put up, like a comedy channel, an extreme sports channel, a cooking channel. These are all channels that are on the upper cable stations on television that would have a good transition to mobile, and as long as you're providing high quality content, the unbranded channels will do well. But you need to have even higher quality because there's nothing to bring a viewer to that channel. But once you do have them and you show the quality, they'll stay there for the long term.
Okay, so here's where I put my jaded hat on from basically being an early investor in internet-based programming and channels. It's easy said that when the people start to find out about the channel, they start viewing it. But it could you could be out of business and spend more money than you could ever hope to raise to get people to notice that channel. So my question to you is, how do we get people to notice original programming that's packaged into an original channel without going broke in between?
Well, this is absolutely not like the internet. When you're on a carrier deck, the carriers have 30 or 40 channels that they're offering. Under Moby, they're offering a large amount of content, but if you look at a Sprint deck and a VCast, there's a finite amount of channels. And as a consumer or as a user of that, if you're on VCast or Sprint and you go to the comedy channel, there's only 3 or 4 channels that you have available to yourself. So there's not that emptiness of channels like the internet where you have to sort of guess an URL. There's a finite video on demand menuing system to find those channels.
But is that just for today, when people are just developing it? What happens when there's 300, 400, 500 different, I get pitched at least 10 ideas a day, no exaggeration in emails, about the next great mobile channel. And I'm trying to say, well, what's my hook? Why should I finance one over the other? What's the marketing? What's the promotion? What's the hook that gets people to do it? Because right now I agree, if there's only 3 choices, guess what? You got a 30% chance someone's going to look at it.
It's all about
But when you got 300, I got to tell you, you get so micro-fragmented, I don't see how anybody makes any money.
It's all about distribution. The only reason why, again, it seems like a popular reference this week. You bring up YouTube, it's a destination, I'd say. There is where the people are going. So with mobile video, it's about distribution. If somebody has channels up on Sprint and Verizon, those are the companies to invest in, because having a piece of content that isn't placed anywhere doesn't do anyone good. It's not going to generate revenue. Having the distribution and having those viewers or those subscribers is where the value is.
So, Rutan, I'm going to skip you just for a second. Thomas, since you're a producer of individual shows, all right, explain your business model to us. I mean, I don't know what the cost of production is of these shows. What's the quality of the production, and what kind of distribution do you get for your most popular shows? Give us an idea about that.
A lot of questions here, so let's start from the general and go to the specific. Currently, our products are sold $4.99 a month as an individual premium on Singular, Sprint, Boost, Nextel, and the consumer goes into these menus you're talking about. We'll get to that in just a second because you make an important point, and they select something that's interesting to them. It's like, we call who we want, we text who we want. If we want a hip-hop ringtone, we look around and we find a hip-hop ringtone. If we want a classic game like Pac-Man, we look around and we find a classic game. If it's a younger person and they want Doom, they look around and they find Doom. And right now on those menus, it is hard to get around. It is difficult to find things. And part of that is due to the carriers opening up and putting so much choice out there. So hats off to them for spending billions of dollars making networks. And then within the footprint on the phone there, it's a little bit challenging, but they're opening it up and they're building menu structures by genre so you can find it. What our products are specifically, what do you get for your $4.99 a month? Okay, so that goes to the quality of what is in there. We make genre-based channels such as Hip Hop Official, all things hip hop, Altitude around alt rock, Fantasy Sports Edge, which is all things for the fantasy player, and inside each of those channels there are scores of shows, that dozens of them are updated each week. The charts, news information on the music channels, who's hurt, who's not, and sporting news commentary on things like Fantasy Sports Edge. So it's a deep dive into those, and people buy them because they have a deep lifestyle affinity for hip hop, or for alt rock for college and post-college individuals, or they're a fantasy sports freak and they have to know things and are in multiple fantasy leagues, and we don't care if it's a Yahoo or ESPN league. For $4.99 a month, you get all things fantasy. Now, how do they find it? Well, all of this content is produced by us. It's original content produced at broadcast television standards off two studios that we have in Sherman Oaks. So the quality that you see there is being put together by producers who have been producing for television. This is not two guys in a garage. This is a professional production studio with the same type of professionals in the editing bays that are making regular content. But now they're making it with an eye for the made-for-mobile recipe that we put together so that people on the go can consume it in such form that it makes sense. 3, 4, 5-minute segments that are properly shot, edited, written, produced for the mobile audience. Now, awareness. That's the big heavy lifting. The heavy lifting is going to be marketing and awareness in this space. We take our original content, and let's look at fantasy for 1 second. We put things in there like the Sporting News or RotoWire or KFFL. Those are ingredient brands. That's like the Gore-Tex tag on a Columbia jacket. When the fantasy player buys Fantasy Sports Edge and they see RotoWire, they see KFFL, they see Sporting News, oh, that's the stuff that I browsed during the week when I was online playing Yahoo Fantasy Football or ESPN Fantasy Football. This is a credible product with high production value, and I see it. And then we partner with those ingredient brand partners to promote it. But the marketing and discovering is in fact the heavy lifting. And that question you asked isn't going to get answered today. That's going to evolve over the next years. As you use a number of 300, I don't think it's that high, but it's a heck of a lot more than the 30 choices the customer has now.
So what is the cost to produce that original programming, including any kind of license fee you have to use Roto News or ESPN? Because I can't imagine ESPN is just happy for you to take their brand and put it out someplace.
Well, the licensing varies. Sometimes it's a flat license of a couple $1,000s a month. Sometimes it's pro rata. The fees vary, and you're correct. The bigger apples in the bin command a higher rate. But most of our stuff is originally produced and written, and we don't depend on the ESPNs. We're using RotoWire, KFFL, things like that. Or in the case of music, we're seen by the music industry as a wireless Vibe magazine, and they are actively providing us the same electronic press kits and information that would be provided to magazines. And so we control the licensing cost and the production cost the same way a major studio would, right? You look at your per minute cost and you manage it. But our costs aren't going to be much different than what you would see per hour for an editor or a producer.
Yeah, I guess though when you mention a studio and they have their per unit cost, I mean, the studio makes money in multiple windows, not just a single window. Whereas you're in a mobile window, where else do you make money with your content besides your mobile platform? It's only one place, is that correct?
Correct. It's a revenue share with the carrier on that subscription. And in the future, we're partnering with carriers and already are in discussions about how ad-supported models will work, but we'll leave them to make those announcements when those platforms are released.
So underlying all this stuff has to be some technology in the phone. So Ratan, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what, you're so dependent upon service operators making a successful business model that makes people want to buy new handsets or new devices where you place your semiconductors. So how do you work with that community to kind of foster new and innovative functions and features to the devices to get people to do new and different things before the service is even really created?
It's difficult. You just explained the problem right there. Yeah. So I don't know if you guys realize this, but to make a semiconductor device is A, expensive. You keep asking people how much it costs to make a certain piece of programming, etc. To make a dedicated semiconductor device to do a function, ballpark, rough numbers, you're talking $10-odd million, euros. So it's a lot of money. You could get stuck with a device that doesn't do much and you have to bin it. Then, you know, your bosses get very upset. So that you don't want that to happen. The other problem we face is that it takes a long time to make a semiconductor device. So while standards are evolving, it becomes difficult to figure out what to do, how to size it, etc. Again, to make a semiconductor device can take anything from 1 year to 2 years even, depending on the complexity. So we have to safeguard against all of this. And what we learned in Europe, and took a lot of the trials, is that there are two bits. There's a technical problem you have to face with mobile TV or any of these new features, and there's the commercial issue where you got to get all the players like this together to decide on a standard. Mobile TV, you mentioned earlier, DVB-H, you have DMBT, you have ISDBT, and it's fragmenting even more. So what we do is we make it a very, very, very flexible solution to begin with. So these are big processors that you can pretty much run a lot of algorithms on. So we make it very flexible. When we start working with our partners here, we try and decide on a business model that they engage in. We have little control on the business model. So on the commercial side, we try and develop an ecosystem where we can decide ahead of time, in very broad brush terms, what the feature set should be. And then we make an extremely flexible device when a market is just taking off. The other side is we have a good idea, but on mobile TV, for example, we learned from the trials they're very simple problems, but it makes it unusable. So dropped frames, no matter how good your transmission is, they're dropped frames, and when you're watching it, suddenly you see it go all jerky. So we have to find ways of compensating for this. The other issue is, I don't know if you've taken your cell phone outside these days, especially here. In Holland, it's not a problem. It's always dark, so you can always see the screen, you know? But in California, you walk out there and your screen is blank. So people get upset when they can't see anything. So we're working on stuff. You have to work on the technical side as well, so that even in bright sunlight, you can see something. So it's a difficult task, and to get new features introduced takes a long time. So the answer is flexibility, but that means added cost.
So what I want to try to get to too, when we talk about technology and platforms that make the system go, everyone has to make money eventually so that they can reinvest in their own business. So, Tone, what kind of volumes do you need to get a device to be profitable given the amount of investment you need to make?
Quite a few.
I don't know what that means.
Quite a few means.
Okay, does that mean $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, or 10?
Well, I told you how much it costs, right, to make one. So you're looking for any market to take off. You're looking at tens of millions of pieces to be sold. Tens of millions. Otherwise, it's not interesting.
Okay, so tens of millions to be sold. Okay.
So a good market would be 30% of the current cell phone market is a great market.
30% of 180 million users. Is that what you're saying?
No, 30% of a billion handsets.
Oh, billion handsets. Oh, okay. I was just thinking US.
So that makes it a very nice
billion.
market.
All right. So 300 million. And
well, that would be a very nice market. For a few tens of millions, we can survive.
that's a big spread. 10 million and 300 million. You know.
Well, in all seriousness, you need a minimum of 10 to 20 million.
Right. That sounds right. So we're saying 10 to 20 million units to be interesting, and we heard, Paul, you saying you have 1 million subscribers for your service. So it seems to be that there seems to be a gap between 1 million subs or 2 million subs that you said and the 30 million subs that Rotan needs to meet to come out with new products. How do we reconcile between getting from 2 million subs to 30 million subs in a short enough period of time to keep NXP, sorry, I was going to say Philips, to get NXP excited to continue to invest in the fabs to build those chips?
Well, I do like the implication that we have 100% market share, but unfortunately we don't. You know, the 2 million, or the approaching 2 million that we have is predominantly in the U.S., and that's, you know, to be honest, it's pretty early in the game right now. I mean, we launched 3 years ago, but honestly, you know, the service is really now mature to the point where it has a much broader appeal and has, you know, full motion video and the high quality and the variety of channels that really makes it a compelling service offering. And the carriers are realizing that and now just starting to market it. So I think the 10 to 20 million, I mean, if you're looking at worldwide handset volume, I mean, I think it's definitely doable.
In addition, we're only talking about streaming video channels. A lot of carriers in Europe and in Canada and in Asia are doing video downloads, downloading a 30-second video clip. From a hardware point of view, that there probably is tens of millions of phones that can play a video clip, but for streaming video, that's a smaller market right now.
Another point to bear in mind is that when you start talking about new technologies, new networks like MediaFLO and DVB-H, they're relying on frequencies that's encumbered until, 2009. So even though you'll see Flow probably launched before DVB-H, really in terms of consumer launch, it's going to be relying on getting clearances in markets where those encumbrances, where it can clear the encumbrances essentially to offer those services. So this is going to be, especially when you start talking about these newer networks, the WiMAXs, the broadcasts, to get layered on top of the cellular network, it is going to be a while before you see this thing really build into a mass market.
Well, let's be careful about that, Bob, right? Because the Crown Castle has some of those frequencies with Modio, and they're trying to basically go out and start to launch their DVB-H service. And let's not take a US-centric view, because if you look in Finland and Northern Europe, they're already rolling out. And there's trials all over the world, from the northern countries to China to South America and to the like, using that DVB-H-based standard, if you will. But another question, actually, Paul, back to you, is, you know, when you have your MobiTV service, how come you don't use the IPG from TV Guide?
It's a good question. We are in discussions with Gemstar TV Guide, and you know, we may in fact do something there.
And what about the other content providers on the panel here? Everyone seems to be, you know, we're the number one, we're the dominant provider. So I'm just trying to reconcile when I hear people say we're the dominant providers. You know, you're supposed to be one of the dominant distributors. Why don't you have all the content providers? Which are your main content providers that you have on your system?
Here in the U.S.?
Yeah.
We've got pretty much all of them. Discovery, ABC, Fox, NBC, I mean, you name it, they're in there.
So you just proved my point. They're all branded channels where people spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to brand those channels. How does that independent production company, that independent channel of VOD, get a shot when people care about Discovery, Natural History, BBC, you know, NBC, ABC, HBO, all those things? How do we get these guys to get a chance when you just made my point that the branded channels are the one that you focused in on?
Well, hold on. You asked me which channels that we have, and so I told you the channels that you would know, and the channels that are the most popular. What we've seen is, you know, those channels are the channels that you need to have to drive adoption. Because if you had and we're, you know, we aggregate a product and we operate the end-to-end service for the operator. So in our case, you know, we weren't going to launch with 25 channels that no one had ever heard of. It wouldn't make any sense. So for us, we needed to have a broad base of channels that were familiar to people. They recognized it was quality content, and we used that as our sort of mechanism to get people to subscribe. But just like a cable operator or any other paid TV service operator, we also have a lot of longer tail content that might not be, you know, people may not have heard of it before, but I'll tell you what, some of those channels do extremely well in our service, and here's why. Some of the, especially the made-for-mobile channels, and unfortunately we don't have any of these partners on stage in our service, but we do use some of our own channels. And I would say about 3 out of the top 6 channels on MobiTV are channels that we create ourselves, where we've gone out and we've aggregated our own cartoons, our own music videos, and we've created channels around it. And here's why it's interesting. It's interesting because we know our subscriber base. And we're not just taking the linear feed as it exists for cable and as it's programmed and it's scheduled for cable. We're actually programming it and scheduling it for our mobile TV audience. And so we do everything in between. We take the linear feed, we do our own content, and we also create hybrid channels.
So that's once again, I think that's another point I want to bring up, and I'd like Thomas and Matt to respond, because here's what I heard. I heard branded channels to get the people to come to your service. Then I heard once you get them to come to the service, you make your own content that you aggregate, that you own, because I would imagine that the margin on that is higher than if you have to go out and license some other people's content. So how does a GoTV or somebody
just
else?
to clarify, we don't produce our own content. We program our own channels using.
So you package.
We package, exactly.
So you do not do any original programming where you
no
go out.
original programming.
But do you take individual shows and create your own individual channel?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So Versale, that's your business, right? You package, correct?
We also package. We don't film any of our own stuff. It's post-production, programming, and packaging. What everyone knows mobile video is focused on 18 to 34. The more programming you have geared toward that demographic, the more subscribers you will get. ABC, NBC, Fox have to look at shows that fit any demographics from 2 years old all the way to 75 years old. Mobile video is 18 to 34. And if you go outside that, the viewership will go down quickly. In addition, you leverage that demographic to go after advertising, which will be coming next year, and the advertisers who want to focus on the 18 to 34 will put their dollars into mobile video to help drive the whole business model. In doing ABC, CBS, no one can deny that will attract viewers, but in order to retain viewers, the quality of the product has to be there.
Thomas?
When you take a look at brands, right? You look at, people don't watch ABC. They watch Desperate Housewives, right? And every year, the television industry on every network develops about 20, 25 new brands a year, new shows. 20 of those die, right? And you're left with the ones that carried over from last year and your super hits. So programming is in the world of building new hits and cultivating an environment to build new hits. In wireless, we are on the nascent side of nascent when it comes to market development. We have over 200 million subscribers in the United States. Boost has 3 million, and yet there's probably just a little bit more than that in mobile television subscribers in the US. So the entire population of people in the US of that 200 million would only be somewhat bigger than Boost's subscriber base. So we're dealing with very, very small numbers in a very nascent market. But pioneers like GoTV and MobiTV and others have been out there ahead of it, saw this coming, building and developing for it. So with that framework, why are we here and how are we successful making made-for-mobile content? Well, to something Matt said, there are demographics that are going to be your early adopters, and researching that and building the programming for them and making it a compelling product for the mobile phone as you establish new brands. 2 years ago, nobody knew what YouTube was either. These things are discovered, and again, the marketing and the promotion is going to be the heavy lifting here, but we are doing our research with consumers, watching every day what they want. We have servers that tell us what they watch, similar to what Paul was talking about, building a library of positive data, not Nielsen, which is accurate to a point, and then guesswork for the last bit. And the debate of where the guesswork starts and ends is something for the cable show. But the issues that we fight is how do you make something really compelling for mobile? It's more than just how you shoot it. It's what you put in it, the demographic you're going after. And why is a person going to use it while they wait for the bus, they wait for a plane, they wait for Starbucks to make their coffee? Or they're sitting bored someplace and they're saying, I'm going to watch some television now. I'm not bored. I'm not missing out on anything. It's doing the research on that, building those products for the consumer the same way that television puts 20 new shows per network in front of us all every year. And you know what? We're going to miss some. But so far, we believe in hip-hop and alt-rock and comedy and fantasy sports. We have some early hits.
I guess let's talk a little bit about rights management for a moment. And Constellation happens to be an investor in 3 or 4 different rights management businesses, ranging from watermarking to encryption to software-based technologies that are used in some of the world's first IPTV deployments. And getting back to the mobile side, the DRM typically needs 2 pieces. It needs something typically needs to be embedded in the content itself. Then something needs to be able to read that embedded signal, that watermark, that fingerprint, that something else. So it's one of those few things that if we really want rights management, we have to get the cooperation of both the programmer and the consumer electronics world, all right, and obviously then the semiconductor side. So I'll get into a little bit about the rights issues, but that's the chicken and the egg, right? I mean, I've been at too many committee meetings, things like the AECS for high definition DVD and a variety of the old SDMI standards and all these other kind of DVD CCA, all these different organizations to kind of come to bring these organizations together. And frankly, I don't think anything's worked yet, to the most part. So unless there is a level of cooperation between the programmers and the device/manufacturers, this market will never develop over time, period, end of story. What are your guys' views about what it's going to take to get this level of cooperation to break this logjam?
Well, I think, I think this is very interesting and very near to my heart, because the DRMs are getting more and more and more and more complex. And to run these DRMs costs more and more and more computing power, and then someone hacks it in a day. Maybe 2 days. So I think from a semiconductor side, we do like DRM. It means our sell prices get higher and higher. We try anyway. But I think we need some understanding of a reasonable DRM standard. Now, people who put out DRM would like to renew it with every time you listen to a song or every time you watch a clip. But maybe we have to compromise and come up with some form of natural degradation every time you make a copy.
Well, that sounds a little like analog, though, doesn't it?
Well, that's the whole idea. And in the digital world, we can do it. It's very simple.
No, but now you want to go from a digital world back to an analog world?
No.
Okay, what do you want to do?
It's digital. You do it all in digital.
Right.
But through algorithms, you can degrade the content gradually over time.
But Tom, do you want to say anything, or?
I'm not an expert on chips, as my fellow panel members here. But what we see is that the carriers are joined at the hip with the device manufacturers. And I haven't heard anybody talk about a digital phone in the US. There was an article 4 years ago that turned out to be untrue, that someone has actually hacked into a conversation on a CDMA phone in the US. And so you have a closed loop there where the consumer electronics companies, Samsung, LG, Motorola, are making phones to standards using closed chips and MSL, master subsidy locks, put in place by the carriers so that they can get the lease back on the phone that we all paid for 2 years. And it's a closed system. So in a streaming world, you have a closed system. The issue comes, and we ask carriers about, what about when you're getting, if you're going to let a subscriber actually download my content to a chip on board the phone and then transport that? Well, now you're back to the internet, right? You're back to iTunes, you're back to Napster, you're back to all of that. And so we basically are beholden to the carriers and the standards and the systems they put in place. And right now in the streaming world, and perhaps Paul can comment also, we see it as kind of as a closed system. And, and any of the content providers that we work with, I'm sure you too, so far are satisfied.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with your statement that DRM is potentially locked up. And if you look at even the OMA DRM, I mean, it's being delayed again. But the truth is, for our business, it doesn't really affect us that greatly because we have an end-to-end system in a closed network. So we do anticipate having the capability to store on the phone, and we'd like to have that capability. And so, the longer the delay, it delays our ability to deploy that service. But in the meantime, it's not stopping us from running our business.
I just want to get, I guess, one more question, then we'll go to the audience. In terms of, once again, on the rights side, since we're very sensitive on that, is that, you know, there's contracts that are coming up next year from the various guilds that, you know, rumor has it that there may be strike next year or the year after. Part of that is basically they're really upset that the broadcasters are basically taking their content, putting it on an iTunes, putting it on a mobile device, not paying those producers or direct producers of that program, those creators of that content, because it's, quote, promotional, right? So therefore, you're getting it for very low, you're getting it for 99 cents or whatever it is like that. Well, not you, but iTunes or whatever we're going to say. So ABC makes their 99 cents, and our friends, you know, Wolf or Bruckheimer or those folks don't make anything. And I can tell you right now, that's an untenable model that exists right now, and something's got to break. So, you know, do you think that, one, they'll solve those issues, right? Because otherwise the content will get clogged and it will stop, and that's not good for anybody. Or do you think that they will actually begin to create new forms of programming specifically for mobile, and those are big enough brands to basically break the bottleneck?
So I'm probably one of the more optimistic panelists, just because 3 years ago it just looked like a complete and utter nightmare getting any kind of content on the mobile phone. And everyone told us that we wouldn't be able to do it because the rights weren't available and nobody had the rights, etc. 3 years later, it turns out that several channels at least think they have the rights, and they've taken on the risk to go and do it. And I think it does create a little bit of controversy in the industry, but I think it's a healthy controversy and one that needed to be addressed and to come to some kind of a head and be resolved. I also think that you know, the rights aspect is one of the more challenging areas of being able to provide really the high production value content in mobile, is to go and get the rights. I mean, the sports leagues are the perfect example where it's really challenging to get the rights, because ESPN, even though they spent all that money getting the rights to the different leagues that they have, they still don't have the mobile rights. And so you need to go to the league and you got to address it there. But I think the irony is that's one of the opportunities for some of the new startup content channels that are specifically making content for this space and clearing all the rights and moving in fast, because just like in any other new medium where the legacy incumbents were a little bit slower or didn't quite have their act together in time, new upstarts, just like the internet has got Yahoo and Google and the others. So I think there'll be a little bit of that, but I think eventually they'll resolve it, and I don't see it slowing us down.
I think that there's just such an abundance of content out in the world today. Certainly ABC, CBS, NBC are big brands, but we've contacted a variety of owners that have classified their content as VOD. And regardless of the display device or the technology used to deliver it, the media itself is VOD. Versely operates mobile video on demand channels, and as long as that's defined as VOD, regardless of that VOD is displayed on TV, on the internet, or on mobile, there's rights. And those are the kind of owners that we're doing deals with right now.
I guess, being a jaded content investor myself, and I've made a lot of money in the content business. We were investors in CSTV, which we sold to CBS. We're investors in TV One, which is the second largest African American cable network behind BET. So we've been, knock wood, we've been lucky in doing that. But here's the interesting thing that we've observed, in that when you're small, when the market's small, when the network's small, when you're relatively insignificant relative to the brands, they leave you alone because they can't come after you, because what are they going to get from you? There's really nothing to really get, all right? But when you become big enough, when you become important enough, when you start grabbing enough market share, when you start getting enough money, then all of a sudden everyone starts waking up and saying, okay, we've let you grow to a certain size, now we need our fair share of the money, okay? And that's when the next wave of heartache happens for the business models. And right now, I would grant you that in the mobile space, we're all too small for anybody to really care. But maybe 2 or 3 years from now, when we start to get big enough, and the revenue flows start to get significant enough, there are going to people be coming with tin cups in hand saying, all right, I've given you a free ride, Now I want more money. How does your business model survive that? Why don't each of you go down there?
So I think from our standpoint, you know, for the channels that we produce ourselves, where we would have that take on that liability, you know, we're explicitly aggregating the content for this purpose. So I think we're pretty well cleared there, and we're not, you know, anything that's vague, we just wouldn't bother doing. Where we're licensing other channels, Discovery, TLC, whatever, if they have, you know, contract negotiations, that's their responsibility. They're going to have to manage it. And if they come back to us and say, look, you know, we're going to have to take the channel down, which I would be very surprised that they would do. They would probably just have to, it's going to eat into their margin more than anything. And keep in mind that
their margin or your margin? You don't think they're going to pass that through to you?
Well, I mean, we have contracts with them that you know, I don't, no, actually I don't, actually.
Okay.
Because if you look at this business, especially for the linear channels, it's all incremental revenue for them.
It's because they're not paying the producers. That's why it's all incremental
That's
for them,
exactly
and
right.
that's going to change.
Right, but if they're at 100% margin, because it doesn't cost them anything to do it now, and if, you know, if we're paying them, you know, what their effective cable rate is, right? Then it's their responsibility to manage the rights to the channel, and that's our agreement with them is we're licensing your channel, and you are clearing all the rights for your channel. And if you're not doing that, then you know you're violating the contract.
From our perspective, where we really fit into this discussion is the fact that there are going to be some newly created channels. We have a number of them represented here. Some of the networks are also going to create new channels as well under their big brands. So it wouldn't just be a simulcast of their existing service. And what we can do is provide a guided search experience that people need to go through this vast amount of content that's going to be on offer and provide some advice in terms of what you want to watch. And that's really TV Guide's legacy. It's not participating necessarily in the sensationalism that makes up a lot of the entertainment content, but rather providing very useful information to the consumer in an entertaining fashion about the actors that they like, about the programs that they like, about the networks they like. And again, make it simple for them to navigate and find what they want, irrespective in terms of how it's being branded and delivered.
Yeah, one other quick comment, just building on that. One of the things that MobiTV also provides for our channels is, you know, they know typically where the gray areas are, and if they're worried about those gray areas, we have a system that can accommodate them, so that if we're licensing their channel and they have a few programs in that channel that maybe are gray areas for them or that they just don't feel comfortable with, then what we do is we record the channel. And we'll replace the gray area content with other content that they give us. So we help them sort of in advance, you know, provide what looks like their regular channel, but there might be some pockets that get replaced.
Similar to Paul, from a legal standpoint, we have agreements with all our content partners. We're not looking to download videos off the web illegally and deliver them over our network. From a business model standpoint, it's about diversification. The more channels and the more programs you have being delivered on those channels, if one of those content partners says, you know what, we just got into a big problem with SAG and take us down, well, we have 20 other programs that will continue. So from a business model standpoint, it's about diversification and distribution. And one or two programs shouldn't cause anyone in this panel to go out of business.
We started off talking about DRM, where you have content and trying to protect it, and I think we went into an IP and licensing discussion. That area we have very little to do with, of course, we think.
So we'll just blame it on Rotunda.
Blame it on the semiconductor.
Right, yeah.
But even there, when you talk about IP and licensing, the liabilities we face sometimes is the ability to run these IPs securely. Again, we are more involved with keeping the content whole.
Well, as a producer, producer of original made-for-mobile content and not an aggregator of the full original form, we're largely unaffected. So whether it's a drive-by shooting or full-scale war among the guilds, we're more likely to cover it on a news show than we are to get by it.
All right,
An opportunity for you.
I'd like to open it up to the audience. We have, I guess we have about 10 minutes. Yes, in the back. State your name and your affiliation, please.
Yeah, I'm Brian Marin. I'm with Retail Entertainment Design. I have a very large video pop culture library of content. I bought a company called Rock America. It was the original Billboard magazine video content from the mid-'70s. That's what started the whole thing. But it relates to about 3 or 4 of you on the panel. I'll let you guys kind of figure this one out. But what I bought was an archive of tape, video, library. It doesn't really necessarily mean I own the rights to that Madonna video. But what I did is I bought a long-term relationship with those record labels, movie studios, and content providers. That now that I have these old service agreements, if you will, to be able to provide promotional content from these folks, adding an addendum to that agreement seems to be a lot easier than trying to write up a new contract. So whether it's streaming rights or video on demand rights, cell phone rights or download rights, I agree with you, Cliff, that the licensing and there's other people whose hands will come out that need to be paid for it. But my question to everyone is that if this thing does get to mass velocity and we start creating content with multiple labels, studios, etc., in a new form for them, I think that there is an opportunity for everyone to win. I think Matt's world is basing his business on it, Paul and Tom as well. So, what do you guys think overall about the idea of saying, this is just another channel for you to make more money compared to, again, Cliff, your concern as a venture capital fundraiser of, wait a minute, let's get the lawyers involved?
My 2 cents is that if I'm a broadcaster and I bought that show and I put it on to me it's just another window, right? But I'm not the problem. It's the producers. It's the Jerry Bruckheimer who basically says, I'm not getting paid for that. Therefore, you may think you own it. I don't think you own it. And that's where the breakdown, that's where I think the breakdown in the model is. And I can tell you, some of those guys are our investors. I'm not making it up. They're basically pissed off right now that they're not getting paid for content that they produced, that they didn't have the foresight to think of a new window or a new device at the time that they struck their deals, and it's being quote unquote positioned as promotion, which means they don't have to get paid. And they're saying to themselves, if I'm not going to get paid, why am I going to help those guys be more and more successful? I'm not making any more money on that deal. So that's the backlash that I'm talking about. It's not a legal backlash in the strictest sense. It's really, they're not going to get the support of the creative community if the creative community doesn't get paid because the broadcasters or the guys who own that channel, if you will, are just going to propagate it through. And I think that's going to come to a screeching halt sooner rather than later.
Cliff, you can give Jerry my number. I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah, I don't know. The screeching halt is a bit extreme, but I think the interesting note is the example you gave, which is the music industry, which is, as I've seen in this space, is one of the harder and more challenging groups to work with, just because maybe it's inherent in their industry, but also I think it's partly because you have the artists and so many different people involved in those rights. But that's an area where, in the early days, we had sort of, we had some channel partners that shall remain nameless that were sort of riding on this. Well, we're still kind of using it as promotional purposes, and the record labels finally said, no, that's not going to fly. And so we, as a content aggregator, were kind of counting on, one of our big partners to go out and create some music video channels for us, which we really desperately wanted. And finally, it wasn't happening in the industry. So we actually went directly to the music labels, and we formed a deal with them where we're actually paying them, which is very uncommon. MTV for the longest time didn't pay for music videos, and the record labels said, hey, we're not making that mistake anymore. MTV made too much money, off our back, and MTV hardly plays any music videos anymore, so it's kind of a
Don't get me wrong, my addendums definitely come with a price tag.
yeah,
So
exactly.
it's not
Yeah.
free,
So
but-
they are for sale. There's
Yeah,
no
they
question
like
about
it as
that.
a new revenue stream, but the, yeah.
Yeah.
We
Good
see,
luck.
we see high-end agents every week that come and pitch us on things, on new ideas. They want to bring something new and interesting to wireless, and we hear that out. But in terms of the library stuff, they see it in one sentence as syndication without royalty. And they are sitting back there waiting and lighting fuses.
Yeah. Which makes sense.
That's right. Yes,
So
right.
I'm curious, what is
Name and affiliation.
Mark Smith, I'm with Verizon. What sort of data can you give us in terms of the average length of a 2-minute session?
So, are you asking me or anyone on the panel?
There's 3.
So for us, you know, we see. I think we've spoken about this in the past, and it's it's nothing that we haven't revealed before. We still call it snacking on TV, where people are watching 5 to 10 minutes at a time. We have frequent interaction with the service, so we tend to see subscribers, and I think part of it is the nature of the service. It's mobile, so you're out and about, you're waiting in line, you've got 5 minutes to kill, you're watching a little bit of TV. And this also, I think, serves the question that you would ask me early on about, millions of people all watching at the exact same time. That's not the phenomenon that we're seeing in the mobile, because people don't sit down and watch their mobile phone for 3 hours at a time with their friends, sitting around having a beer. It's just not how people are. We see it as a very different experience than watching TV at home. And that's also why we're interested in not just licensing the existing channels, which have a lot of value to our service, but also creating new ones that can serve that type of purpose.
We agree with, our findings are very similar, and just to add on one thing you said, it's not that they won't watch for 3 hours, it's that you can't watch. And there's tremendous opportunities, Cliff, in the battery market for funding.
Yeah.
3 hours is about the limit.
I
know.
There's an unlimited stream of folks always trying to give us a jingle.
But I think there's also an element of regional nature of how people behave. So in places like Japan, we have a long commute. Time they view it is a lot longer. So of course it's not 3 hours, but you do see like a lot of people watching shows 20 minutes or so. In Korea as well, you see very long watching periods.
And that goes the same in the U.S. with age groups, 15 to 18, 18 to 25, and then 25 up, or 25 to 34, different viewing habits.
Well, everybody, I wanted to thank everybody. I tried to create a little controversy here. I wasn't successful. Usually a great panel. I get some people yelling at each other. We didn't do it this time, but it was a great panel because of the complexity. So thanks, everybody.